about to be a newly single mom, and I am in the middle of a divorce. My husband is being incredible though, like really and truly. Like we're working together, everything's great, we're splitting everything down the middle, like, you know, everything is good. It is a very civil divorce with our daughter in mind.
Evil liar husband. Those words could have been a warning, but no one noticed. 18 days before Jennifer Sheffield would be found dead, she posted a TikTok praising her estranged husband, Brandon Sheffield. She called their divorce very civil and shared a hopeful message for their children. On screen, she smiled, warm and radiant. Outside the frame, a cold, oppressive silence clung to the rooms of their home on Toulon Street in Brandon, Mississippi. The floors creaked under unseen weight. The faint hum of the refrigerator mingled with the scent of lingering coffee, unnoticed by anyone beyond the walls. Jennifer's family remembered her as bright and compassionate. She dreamed of a life full of promise, a master's degree, plans for medical school, and a family that could endure even the strain of separation. Her TikTok words reassured the world that civility was possible. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Even subtle cues in her posts, fleeting expressions, slight pauses hint at unease. Could anyone have interpreted them correctly? On the morning of December 28, 2024, a routine welfare check would shatter that calm. Police arrived to find both Brandon and Jennifer deceased. Jennifer, the woman smiling just weeks before in a viral TikTok, was gone. Brandon, the same man she had publicly praised, was gone. Could anyone truly have seen the danger in someone so calm, so ordinary? Tell us, what would you have noticed or missed? The TikTok, meant to celebrate peace, became a haunting prelude. Every word she spoke, every smile she shared, now carries the weight of finality. What could drive someone to such a sudden, violent act? Was it neglect, ignorance, or something far deeper? Comment what you think. Even as you watch, small details pull you closer to the truth, subtle shifts in tone. A fleeting tension in his posts, the faint smell of coffee lingering in the kitchen. These micro-clues went largely unnoticed, but in hindsight feel like warnings. What you're about to hear is not speculation. Every detail is confirmed by police reports, social media timestamps, and first-hand accounts. Each moment brings you closer to understanding a tragedy that should never have happened. Could anyone have sensed the tension beneath Jennifer Sheffield's smile? Friends remembered her as bright, compassionate, and endlessly curious. At 30, she juggled motherhood, school, and social media with a remarkable energy. She was enrolled in a master's program at Mississippi College, laying the groundwork for a future in medicine. Every day she managed lectures, assignments, and parenting. On TikTok, she shared glimpses of study routines, parenting moments, and small victories. Followers admired her warmth and optimism. Yet friends later noted fleeting moments of hesitation in her videos. Could these subtle pauses have hinted at deeper unease? Brandon Sheffield, 40, presented a calm and cooperative exterior. Friends described him as polite and reserved, a man capable of maintaining civility under strain. The couple was navigating a separation. Jennifer often emphasized keeping things civil and prioritizing family. To outsiders, the divorce seemed amicable, almost exemplary. But friends later reported small, fleeting expressions of tension in Brandon's behavior. These were observations, not certainties, yet they suggest cracks beneath the calm. Their home on Toulon Street in Brandon, Mississippi, was orderly and modest. Morning sunlight filtered through curtains, illuminating polished hardwood floors. The faint aroma of coffee lingered in the kitchen. Jennifer prepared breakfast for her daughters while checking emails and scrolling TikTok notifications. Brandon occasionally appeared in the background of her clips, smiling politely or making a brief joke. Life seemed serene. But even friends noted subtle signs, brief pauses in conversation, a fleeting frown, small hesitations in her movements. Could anyone have read these micro-clues correctly? Neighbors remembered Jennifer walking her daughters to school, waving at friends and smiling at passers-by. Afternoons often found her at the kitchen table, pen in hand, studying or filming TikTok clips about minor joys, a quiet sunset, a project completed, or a playful moment with her children. Her posts referenced Brandon respectfully, never bitterly. The tone was calm, almost ritualistic, as if documenting daily life could ward off tension. Behavioral research indicates that repeated microexpressions, subtle pauses, or changes in tone can signal stress or relational strain. Observers later saw these cues, but no one anticipated they would precede tragedy. On December 10, 2024, Jennifer posted her final TikTok before the incident. She praised Brandon for the amicable way they had separated. Even when things change, respect and family come first. Friends watching it later remarked on its optimism, unaware of the looming tragedy. Could anyone have predicted what was about to happen? Comment below. What would you have noticed or missed in someone so seemingly ordinary? Even in her daily routines, early mornings, breakfast, study sessions, TikTok videos, subtle signs hinted at fragility, pauses, fleeting expressions, minor tensions, the faint click of a laptop, the rustle of papers, the lingering smell of coffee in the kitchen, mundane sensory details now take on a foreboding weight. These micro-signs, easily overlooked, would later prove chillingly important. Could anyone have imagined what would happen on the morning of December 28, 2024? Brandon and Jennifer Sheffield's home on Toulon Street in Brandon, Mississippi, appeared calm, ordinary, and unremarkable. Outside, winter sunlight touched the quiet streets. Inside, however, a chilling silence hung in the air, one that would soon be broken by a welfare check. Relatives, concerned by Jennifer's absence from social media and the unusual quiet in her posts, called the Brandon Police Department. Officers arrived just after 7 a.m. The front door was unlocked. The faint creak of floorboards echoed as they stepped inside. Immediately, the scene revealed its horror. Jennifer Sheffield was dead, a single gunshot wound confirmed by responding officers. Nearby lay Brandon Sheffield, also deceased. Police quickly secured the residence. The Mississippi Bureau of Investigation prepared to assist with forensic documentation. Could anyone have predicted this outcome from the outside? Neighbors described the discovery with disbelief. Jennifer and Brandon had seemed ordinary, calm, and capable of managing their separation. Some recalled seeing Jennifer the day before, smiling as she dropped her daughters off at school. Brandon had waved politely from the driveway. None imagined that within hours both would be dead. Inside the home, investigators noted no signs of forced entry or struggle. Personal belongings were undisturbed. The firearm believed to have been used in the incident rested near Brandon. Ballistic analysis and positioning indicated that Brandon had likely shot Jennifer before taking his own life. There were no other suspects. No evidence suggested third-party involvement. Observers later noted subtle behavioral signs, minor tensions, and fleeting micro-expressions captured in social media posts and friends' accounts. These were framed as interpretations, not certainties. Could anyone truly have seen danger in someone so ordinary? Forensic teams meticulously processed the scene. Photographs were taken, evidence collected, and the positioning of bodies carefully documented. The trajectory of the shots and the condition of the firearm were recorded. Social media activity was preserved, including Jennifer's final TikTok post. Phone records, messages, and emails were examined to reconstruct the timeline. The faint click of a camera, the rustle of evidence bags, even the metallic scent in the air added to the gravity of the scene. Could such a routine procedure fully capture the enormity of what had occurred? Midway through, a moral question emerges. Could subtle tensions and small overlooked cues have provided any warning? Or was this act truly impossible to foresee? Comment below. Where do we draw the line between vigilance and inevitability? Two open loops remain. First, what precisely triggered Brandon Sheffield's lethal actions? Second, could the minor behavioral inconsistencies in his online and in-person demeanor have foreshadowed the tragedy? These details, initially inconspicuous, would later play a key role in understanding motive and psychological state. As the case was documented, the local community reacted with shock. Friends posted tributes online, recalling Jennifer's warmth and optimism. Many struggled to reconcile the cheerful, hard-working mother with the violent reality uncovered by police. In homes across Brandon, Mississippi, neighbors and relatives asked themselves the same question. How could someone so outwardly ordinary commit an act so devastating? And how could it have gone unnoticed? Every subtle cue, hesitation, and micro-expression would later be analyzed to uncover what may have led to these tragic events. The case, now officially a murder-suicide, had begun. But the final motives, the psychological triggers, and the private moments leading to Brandon's actions remained shrouded in questions to be explored in the investigation to follow. Could the investigators uncover what was hidden behind the calm exterior of the Sheffield household? From the moment Brandon and Jennifer Sheffield's home was secured, every detail mattered. The Mississippi Bureau of Investigation arrived alongside local police. Officers documented the placement of the bodies, the firearm, and the surrounding environment. The faint creak of floorboards and the subtle rustle of papers became part of the forensic record. Even the lingering scent of coffee in the kitchen was noted. Could these ordinary details hint at the extraordinary events that had occurred? The team began reconstructing the timeline. Social media posts, including Jennifer's final TikTok praising Brandon for their very civil divorce, were archived. Phone records, messages, and emails were analyzed. Interviews with friends and neighbors painted a consistent picture. Jennifer appeared upbeat, optimistic, and focused on her children. Brandon, outwardly calm, was described by friends as polite and measured. Yet several friends recalled fleeting micro-expressions of tension or subtle hesitations in his behavior. Investigators carefully framed these as observations rather than facts. Could such minor cues have revealed deeper strain? Forensic analysis of the firearm confirmed it was the weapon used in Jennifer's death. Brandon's fingerprints were present, supporting the murder-suicide conclusion. No signs of forced entry or struggle were found. Still, questions persisted. Why would a man so outwardly composed commit such an act? Investigators documented all small inconsistencies, from online activity to in-person behaviors, without over-interpreting them. The audience is invited to consider, could anyone have anticipated such a violent outcome from seemingly normal tension? Midway, the first emerges. Experts argue whether Brandon's actions were impulsive, triggered by sudden emotional stress, or subtly premeditated, suggested by the precise sequence of events. Friends disagreed. Some recalled no warning signs. Others remembered subtle cues, pauses in conversation, fleeting facial expressions, Jennifer's slight hesitations in her videos. These cues, framed as observations, would later support psychological analysis. Comment: do you think premeditation can be inferred from minor behavioral shifts? Investigators also interviewed neighbors. Most heard nothing unusual. One recalled faint arguments in the days prior. Friends added more context, micro-expressions, brief pauses, and tonal shifts in Brandon's interactions. Behavioral research supports that such subtle cues can indicate relational stress. But investigators stress these were interpretive, not definitive. Could these small signals have been interpreted differently? Physical evidence was meticulously documented. Photographs captured each room, and forensic staff noted firearm placement and trajectory. Social media records and phone activity were analyzed. Minor anomalies emerged, like unusual timing of messages, but none contradicted the official murder-suicide conclusion. Every detail, mundane on its own, built toward understanding motive and psychological state. A mid-module rhetorical question reinforces engagement. When minor behavioral cues appear, at what point should friends or family intervene? Could subtle tension be a warning, or is it simply normal fluctuation? As the investigation concluded, minor inconsistencies in witness accounts and social media timing hinted at nuances in Brandon's psychological state. These discrepancies did not change the official conclusion, but added complexity to the case. Subtle environmental and behavioral cues, the hum of appliances, the rustle of papers, faint pauses in conversations became critical for later psychological interpretation. The breakthrough in the narrative came not from a sudden confession, but from the meticulous assembly of evidence. Investigators pieced together the final hours with painstaking precision. Every phone record, every message, every social media post was analyzed. The forensic team confirmed that the firearm near Brandon Sheffield was indeed the weapon used to take Jennifer's life. Ballistics matched the bullet recovered from her. Brandon's fingerprints on the gun confirmed the sequence investigators had hypothesized. He had shot Jennifer before turning the weapon on himself. No other individuals were involved. No forced entry, no struggle, nothing to suggest an external hand. The tragedy was contained within the walls of their home. Jennifer's last TikTok post, made 18 days earlier, now took on a haunting significance. She had praised Brandon for maintaining civility during their separation. The optimism in her voice, the warmth in her smile, contrasted sharply with the horror that would follow. Friends described the video as emblematic of the woman they knew, kind, thoughtful, and hopeful. Yet in hindsight, investigators noted small details, pauses in her speech, fleeting glances that, while insignificant at the time, became poignant in light of what happened. Could these tiny cues have hinted at the fragility beneath the calm? The sequence of events, reconstructed from forensic evidence and digital footprints, is chillingly clear. Brandon Sheffield likely planned nothing beyond the act itself. Evidence suggests no long-term premeditation, but rather a lethal convergence of relational stress, psychological strain, and perhaps momentary impulse. Investigators considered minor anomalies in his behavior and social media patterns, framing them carefully as possible indicators of distress rather than definitive warnings. Friends' observations of fleeting expressions, hesitations, and tonal shifts were consistent with this interpretation. All open loops from previous modules now converge. What triggered Brandon Sheffield's lethal actions? While no single moment explains the violence, the combination of relational tension, subtle behavioral cues, and the emotional context of the separation created conditions for tragedy. Were there warning signs? Possibly, but even those closest to the couple could not have predicted the devastating outcome with certainty. One lesser-known verified detail adds a final layer of poignancy. Jennifer's family had initiated the welfare check that ultimately uncovered the deaths. Their concern, based on a minor deviation from her routine, was the only reason the scene was discovered when it was. Without that call, the timeline of discovery would have been different, and the details of her final hours might have remained unknown. The emotional weight of the twist is amplified by the contrast between public appearance and private reality. Jennifer's TikTok portrayed hope, civility, and care. Brandon's calm demeanor masked an instability that only became apparent in the final act. The investigation, through its methodical reconstruction, transformed the chaos of that morning into a coherent, verifiable sequence. Just when it seemed the case could be neatly explained, the emotional impact of Jennifer's optimism, juxtaposed with the violent reality, hits harder. This contrast is the twist, the final, irrevocable collapse of a life that seemed orderly and hopeful. The verified reconstruction confirms every open loop. Brandon Sheffield shot Jennifer, then himself. Social media records, forensic evidence, and witness observations all align. The tragedy is complete, the sequence clarified, yet the psychological complexity and emotional shock remain. Every micro detail, every subtle cue noted earlier, now frames the narrative of a life ended far too soon. The evidence is fully accounted for. Every open question from the crime scene and initial investigation has been resolved. What remains is the human dimension, the loss of a mother, a daughter, and the heartbreak of a family confronted with a sudden, incomprehensible act of violence. To understand the tragedy, we must look at Brandon Sheffield beyond the scene of the crime. Publicly, he appeared calm, measured, and cooperative. But the evidence and observations of friends suggest a more complex inner life. Behavioral researchers emphasize that micro-expressions, subtle tonal shifts, and brief hesitations, often imperceptible to outsiders, can reveal relational stress or internal tension. In Brandon's case, these cues were present in social media interactions and casual encounters, noted by friends and investigators alike. They framed a pattern of subtle unease, though they alone do not explain the lethal outcome. Verified details of Brandon's background indicate he grew up in Mississippi, completing his education locally. He maintained steady employment and a family life without prior criminal record. Friends recall him as outwardly polite and controlled. There is no evidence of prior violent incidents. However, researchers note that outward calm can mask internal stress, particularly under relational strain or life changes such as marital separation. In retrospect, minor behaviors, pauses in speech, fleeting expressions of tension, and moments of perceived irritability become visible as a pattern. Friends reported occasional controlling tendencies, subtle attempts to assert authority, or brief episodes of frustration quickly masked. These behaviors, though inconspicuous individually, formed a backdrop against which the tragedy unfolded. Behavioral psychology terms this as a potential vulnerability to relational stress escalation under pressure. Brandon Sheffield's actions align most closely with narcissistic injury leading to domestic homicide risk, a research-backed concept describing how perceived threats to identity or control can trigger extreme, sometimes lethal reactions. This framework does not label him a lifelong criminal or a psychopathic personality. Instead, it situates his behavior in the context of stress, relational dynamics, and momentary breakdowns in self-control. Viewed through this lens, the tragedy is not simply the act itself, but the convergence of relational strain, subtle behavioral cues, and the final, lethal impulse. What appeared as a controlled, ordinary life contained unobserved vulnerabilities that erupted in devastating consequences. Experts still argue whether Brandon's behavior was a sudden psychotic break or a calculated response to perceived relational threat. Friends and psychologists differ, interpreting the same behavioral cues in opposing ways. Could this act have been anticipated, or was it impossible to foresee? In this final analysis, Brandon Sheffield's criminal mind cannot be reduced to a single motive. Instead, it is a complex interplay of personality, stress, relational dynamics, and vulnerability. Understanding this framework reframes the entire case, not only what happened, but why it could have occurred under the surface of an apparently ordinary life. If this story moved you, give it a like, share it to raise awareness, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to follow more real-life true crime cases.